Bang, bang.
Good afternoon. The monthly televised meeting of the Council on Aging in the Civic Arts Plaza Boardroom is now called to order at 1:02. Let us all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Vice Chairman Len, will you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for joining us in that, and welcome to our meeting. We've got it's a little bit different format this time, but I think the content will still be here. We've got a lot of things to talk about, and I guess let's start with a roll call, please, Francine.
Good afternoon. Commissioner Fotheringham.
Here.
Commissioner Grimm.
Yes.
Commissioner Healy.
Here.
Commissioner Kopaz. Here. Commissioner Loomis.
Presente.
Commissioner Norkin.
Here.
Commissioner Shentes. Here. Commissioner Searden.
Here.
And Commissioner Wing. Here. Thank you.
All right, we're playing with a full deck today, folks, so let's get going. The time now is item 4 is for public comments. This is a time where we offer the folks from the community to come up and discuss and present things that have to do primarily with the senior community. Whether it's an event, whether it's a situation, we encourage folks to come to have a few moments and just describe what they're thinking about. We have one right now. Are there any other people who want to address the council? But we have our good friend Brenda Birdwell from Senior Concerns. Welcome, Brenda. Let us know what's happening. Oh, excuse me, Brenda. It's been brought to my attention that we have to bring it or limit it to 3 minutes, but I know you have a lot of things going on, I'm not taking your 3 minutes, so it starts when you start.
Okay, happy March. It's not too early to wish me happy birthday. My birthday's the 18th, but I believe in celebrating early and often. So speaking of birthdays, yesterday the Canejo Connections Resource Center was actually born. It's at the Oak Shopping Center at the lower level food court, and it's a partnership between the City of Thousand Oaks, Council on Aging and Youth Commission, Canejo Youth Employment Services, Canejo Parks and Recs RSVP, and Senior Concerns. It's been 3 years in the making, and yesterday it finally happened, so we're very excited about that. All of these comments are available on our website. I should back up and say my name is Brenda Birdwell. I'm a senior advocate with Senior Concerns. My office is at the Global Active Adult Center at 1385 East Jans Road. My telephone number is 805-495-6250, and our Adult Day Center is 805-497-0189, and all of this information is available on our website, www.seniorconcerns.org. So Betty Berry is back to work after taking a little bit of a hiatus for some health issues. So the next Solving the Aging Puzzle Caregiver U series is going to be Tuesday, March the 12th from 4:30 to 6 at the 401 Hodenkamp location. And it's about compassionate communication. And there is respite available for your loved ones if you need that, if you're a caregiver. Betty's next seminar in Westlake is going to be about elder abuse. Could it happen to you? That's going to be Wednesday, March 13th from 1:30 to 3 at the Westlake Village Civic Center. I'm going to be teaching the next Healthy Living class. It's a Stanford evidence-based class to help people deal with chronic conditions if they have a chronic condition or they're caring for someone with a chronic condition. That's going to start Friday, March 22nd from 1 to 3:30. It's a 6-week class, 2.5 hours each class. And I'm the one teaching it. I co-facilitate it. So if you know anyone that might benefit, please pass that along to them. The next, Will You Pass Your Next Driving Test, taught by Betty Berry, will be April the 3rd from 1:30 to 3 at the Simi Valley Senior Center. On April the 10th, Betty will be teaching an identity theft, fraud, and scam seminar at the Westlake Village Civic Center from 1:30 to 3. Senior Concerns is having its second annual Second Chance Fashion Show. That's going to be April 23rd beginning at 11:30. It's going to have a fashion show with items from our bargain boutique, and they're going to be screening breakfast at Tiffany's, and you can also munch on treats and drink champagne as you're enjoying the show. And then it's not too early to sign up for the Love Run, which is June the 2nd. And early bird registration actually ends on March the 15th. So if you think you're going to do it, go ahead and sign up. So all of these things, again, are available on our website, www.seniorconcerns.org. And my number is 805-495-6250. You didn't yank me off.
No, never do that. Thank you, Brenda. Now, I know Brenda can stimulate people in many ways. So if that stimulated you to come up with any other public comments before we close this item, that's enough. All right. I've done my share. All right. We're going to move on to Vice Chair. Vice Chair Len Loomis for the next item under committee reports. Len?
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but thank you, sir. The first item, excuse my bad voice. The first item is senior legislation, and Commissioner Fotheringham, sir, will you give us your report?
Certainly. Thank you, Len. One of the exciting things about entering a new year is that we get to study up on a lot of new laws. And in California, there were about 800 new laws that took effect on January 1st of this year. And one of which in particular I wanted to bring to your attention, and that's that set up a silver alert system that was modeled after the amber alert system, so that if you have a senior in your family, somebody who's 65 or older, and they wander away from the house and you're concerned about their welfare and you want to retrieve them, you no longer have to wait 24 hours and then file a missing persons report before you can get some official help looking for them and so forth. So if the person's 65 years old and has one of the following conditions, they're in danger because of their age, because of their health, because they have some mental or physical disability, because they're in a dangerous environment or there's weather that's threatening to them, or because you think they're in the company of some dangerous person, then you can contact local authorities and get some immediate help. And they will then contact the Highway Patrol and the news agencies and put out a bolo. For those of you who watch the crime dramas on TV, be on the lookout for this person and so forth. And there's one other piece of upcoming legislation that hopefully will become law on January 1st of next year. Our own June Glassmeyer has gotten a legislator to pick up an idea of hers for new legislation, and that would require notary publics to report elder abuse that comes to their attention in some of the documents that they process. And so I think that will be helpful to any of those that feel threatened by being so coerced into signing things they don't want to sign and so forth by loved ones. So we look forward to that next year. Talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Fotheringham. This is the 6-week cold that ends up with 5 weeks of laryngitis. So I'll speak through it. I beg your pardon.
Is there a doctor in the house?
Is there a doctor in the house, he says. This is item 5B. It's a safety report. There have been some odd things happening in the Canejo Valley recently on the crime scene. The so-called knock-knock burglars are the first example. A team will walk down the street knocking on doors. If there is a response, they will move on until they find a house that doesn't respond, and eventually they will try at that house to make their best and quickest entry, probably through a side gate and probably through an unlocked door or window in the back of it. Okay, what's the best solution? It boils down to being completely locked up. Now, there are a number of younger folk in the audience that will not understand the business of being unlocked, but there are an equally larger number of people within the sound of my voice who never locked our doors and windows. nor our cars, nor anything else. And that added up to some situations in which a person coming home late at night might by accident walk into the wrong house in some of the subdivisions that looked very much alike, house by house. You have to be sure that you are locked up all the time. I'd feel much better if I could convince my wife of that, but she still adheres to the old rule. There are some other things that you can do that I think are helpful. I like to leave my house with a radio playing. I have 2 signs on my house, and they're both valid. One says no solicitors. That pretty much indicates that a curmudgeon lives there. Don't mess with him. And the other one is beware the dog. That pretty much indicates that if you do bother the curmudgeon, you're going to get bit. In any event, you have to use your head about this. Don't go running to a local, necessarily burglar system provider, because there's sometimes more trouble than they are worth. Just simple approaches to taking care of yourself. The best solution may be to act as a good neighbor, and when you see something odd happening on your cul-de-sac, please phone it in. If it is an emergency, obviously you use 911. It would be a good idea to have other sets of numbers next to your telephone for people that you could consult with on this. As the weather continues to warm up, remember, it's colder than the devil outside today. Don't leave yourself vulnerable at night. I urge you to set your windows and your doors so that you keep out intruders. And that way you can catch our nice ocean breeze. Most new window sets have ventilation devices on them so you can open them to a narrow width. Finally, again, Linda, if you're listening, please close your garage door every time you use it. And she really values the car that she drives, so I warned her that one day she's going to go into the garage and not find her sweet little hybrid there. Some of the burglars have a new strategy of entering an open garage, entering an open car, and taking the door remote out of it, and then coming back at a more opportune time to get into your home through a garage door that they open with a remote. What it boils down to is we must remember to put away the ways we had while growing up when our houses were safely left open. And the worst thing that could happen is on occasion walking into the wrong one. As our juniors say, just saying, seriously. Moving on now to item 6A, we have a report from the retired senior and volunteer program coordinator, Mr. Shentes.
Thanks, Len. RSVP is again providing free income tax assistance to seniors who are 60 years of age or older, regardless of income, or to anyone whose income is less than $50,000, no matter what their age. They're held, assistance is available on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. On Wednesdays, we're at the Newbury Park Library from 9 till 2 p.m. And generally that location has fewer people than the other locations. On Thursday and Friday, we're at the Goebel Adult Senior Center on James Road, Thursday from 9 to 4, Friday from 9 to 3. There are no appointments are not taken. It's first come, first served. And please, when you come, make sure you have the following: photo identification and a social security card for yourself and for any dependents. Your social security benefit statement, which is a form SSA 1099. Your wage and earning statements, any W-2s or 1099s. Your property tax bill. Your auto registration form. Not the actual registration, but the one they renew against. Any interest and dividend statements you get, such as 1099 INTs or 1099 DIVs. A copy of last year's federal and state tax returns are very helpful. If you plan to have direct deposit of your refund to your bank, then make sure you have your bank routing numbers. And any other information you have as to your income and expenses. This service does not handle Schedule E's, if you have that, such as rental properties. And we do take care of business expenses on a Schedule C, but only if your profit and loss expenses are under $5,000. The other thing RSVP would like to point out, now that as you heard, the Canejo Connections Community Center is open, RSVP is recruiting volunteers to work at that center. And we especially could use volunteers on Sunday, and I believe it's Wednesday is another day we could use a lot of volunteers. Thanks, Len.
Thank you, Marty. And I hope for the rest of us, you will tell all the people down at the Resource Center, and including staff here, thank you so much for what you've done, and let's make this thing work. It must be great to be associated with it. And now on to item 6B, Global Center activities.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'll just follow up from Commissioner Shentes. The income tax program is for those that are 60 and older or anyone of any age of $50,000 income per year or less. So you don't have to be a senior to have your income tax done there. We have lots of exciting programs this month. We have a sleep improvement seminar coming up on Thursday the 14th from 6 to 7:30. We have a disaster preparedness program, and it's through the Red Cross. And a lot of things have changed as far as what you need in your disaster kits, and realizing that 3 days of food and water is not quite enough anymore, has been evident by the things that have been taking place around the country. So this is a time to kind of assess your needs and whatnot. So it would be a good thing to come to. We do have a program called Real Estate Now, and this is for when you're looking at selling your house and do you want part of the stuff to go to your kids? Do you need this? Do you need that? And it's how to find everything you need, because your real estate person usually can't be a lawyer and be all the other things that you might want to do when you're selling your house. So it's how to find all these things and put them together. We do have a living history of the Canejo Valley, and that's a joint program with a Stagecoach Museum, so the Historical Society. And it's pretty much full. We do have a waiting list, but the waiting list is small, so if you do want to get on that, you can. And that's going to be Friday, March 22nd. We are doing a Global Gazette poetry contest. So if you'd like to do poetry, you could submit your poetry at the center, and then by March 22nd, so that's coming up in a couple weeks. And then we're going to do a poetry reading. And that'll be something that even if you didn't do the poetry, you can come and enjoy, and that's free. And that'll be on the 27th of March at 2:30. The Master Gardeners are back doing their series. So this one coming up on Saturday, March 23rd, is going to be about bugs. So you have bugs in your home and bugs in your garden. So what to do about them. It'll be a hands-on workshop, and natural ways that you can get rid of your bugs, and what bugs might actually be good for your garden. So we are taking registration for that as well. And if you want something fun to come and see, we're doing our teen versus senior 8-ball tournament, and that'll be March 20th from 5 to 9 p.m. So we've got our core group of seniors that are going to play. They just finished off their qualifying match, and then the teens will come over, and it's always a really fun night to watch. So those are coming up. Some other very interesting things. We are having an active shooter response training. That'll be at the Global Center, and we have the Thousand Oaks Police Department coming in, and they're going to talk about ways to keep yourself safe, what to do if something really strange like that were to happen in the community or at the center, or if you're at the movies or at lunch or anything. And that's going to be Wednesday, March 13th from 10 a.m. to 11:30, and it'll be in our main hall, and we're taking registration. So if you're interested in that, please come. They did it for Canejo Rec and Park District, and it was interesting. It's always a scary topic, but good. Makes you think. And our community garage sale is going to be in April, but if you want to sign up because you want to join in and get rid of some stuff, this is like a 60 garage sales in one spot. So you can come and shop, or it's $20 for a space, and You can put all your stuff out there. We also have Goodwill that shows up with a big bin, so you don't have to haul it back with you if you don't want to. If you just want to get rid of what you don't sell, you can just haul it to the bin. So that'll be on Sunday, April 14th. We're also started up Meet Me at the Movies, so it's going to be in the afternoons. Our first one will be March 13th at 3:15. The movie's free, but we will do popcorn and soda, each for $1. And we're going to show To Rome with Love. So we have a whole schedule of those. And new trips coming up that go on sale this Friday will be the Space Shuttle Endeavour IMAX film and lunch at Lowry's, Showtime Cabaret and luncheon, and, of course, the show, and that'll be at the Castaways, and a Catalina Island adventure trip. So those 3 are going on sale. And we still have room for the Flower Mart tour and lunch at Felipe's, Huntington Library tea and estate tour, and Around the World in a Day. You're going to go downtown on that one and go to Chinatown, Little Tokyo, Alvera Street, and more. So you will be going around the world in a day. Any questions on any of that, you can call our main number, 805-381-2744. You can email staff at gsac.org. Or you can always go to the website and look up any of this at www.crpd.GSAC. Any questions from anybody? All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, for being here and letting us know about these events. All right, we'll move on to item 7, Commissioner comments, special event announcements. Commissioners? Nancy. Oh, our fashion statement from the thrift store. How did it go?
That was great. I'm really just here today, and I actually wrote something out, which I never do. But I just wanted to say the Resource Center, which has already been mentioned by Brenda, who was one of our very hardest workers on this project. This came about, the idea for this came about was about 5 or 6 years ago. We did a survey of the Senior Adult Master Plan survey of things that were needed in the community. Well, what they found out was a lot of things that people asked for, like I'd like to have this or I'd like to know where to get that, were things we already had in the community. But people did not know how to get to them. And everyone is not totally computer literate and is not able to go on and do it. So it came about the idea that we should have a central place in the city that people could go and get information about services that would be available if they needed home health care, if they needed any of the nonprofit agencies, Senior Concerns, any of these places where they could go. And also so that if they wanted to volunteer, because when I retired, I found it was not as easy as I thought it would be to get a good volunteer job until I went to RSVP. So there are definitely places that you need to know about to get available the services that are here. So we put together, there were 2 committees. One was the Assistance Committee, which was to try to get assistance information to people. And the other one was the Volunteer Committee. And Martin Shentas and Martin was on the Assistance, and I was on the Volunteer for the whole period of time. And so we combined the 2 committees about 2 years ago. And since that time, these people have worked tirelessly. And my husband keeps saying, well, where do you get the money to pay them? And I said, no, they do it for free, So this was the most talented, conscientious, diligent group of volunteers I have ever worked with in my life. I was a PTA president. I've done a lot of stuff, and I've never seen anybody that stepped up to the plate and worked as a team. We had no back and forth, I should do it this way. They were just wonderful, and I really want to individually thank every one of these people who did so much to bring about the opening of this yesterday. And it was started by volunteers. It will now be completely staffed by volunteers and managed by a core team of volunteers. So it is a true volunteer effort of our community to make the community a better and easier place to live. So please support it. It's right where the food court is. It's between the food court and the restrooms at the Oaks Mall. The Oaks has given us a wonderful location. Please, if you know of anybody who just needs to find stuff out, tell them to come up there. We have highly trained volunteers and a great database of information. So thank you to all the volunteers who helped us so much on this. I'm now going to give it to Martin, who will talk a little bit more about what they're doing. Thank you.
We were very, very fortunate in that the people who volunteered on these committees were in their professional lives were doing the things we needed. So working on computer databases, working on marketing, working in advertising, and they were able to lend, professional experience to what we needed. The center had a soft opening yesterday, and they took care of about a half a dozen people who happened to just be walking by. We located it in a desk that the mall had right where the food court is, and fortunately right next to where the restrooms are, and right where the children's play area is. So we get an awful lot of traffic. In fact, if you park over in the garage, when you walk into the Oaks Mall, you have to pass us by. Now, we're going to be open from 11:30 to 6:30 every day except Monday. That will include Saturdays and Sundays. We will be open at that time. And we're trying a kind of an interesting experiment. In the afternoons and on the weekends, we're going to team a teen volunteer with an adult volunteer. And hope that interchange, I think, will be very, very helpful. It'll also inspire people at all age groups to come up and ask us questions. And as I said before, we could use more volunteers, so they'll get, so we can fill in for every single day, make sure we have enough people in reserve in case one of our other volunteers drops out. We're also going to have a continuing training program, so we keep training new volunteers on how we operate and what they have to do. I can't stress the importance of having people available at all times. We want to keep this place going constantly. We're going to be open from now until October 25th, at which time we're going to have to shut down because the mall is going to need that space for the holidays that will be coming up after that. But then we plan to reopen again in 2014.
Again, thank you, Marty and Nancy, for being the driving elements on this committee, on the SAM committee. I don't think any of us can express enough gratitude for what you folks have done. And the database is just amazing, what has been in there. And for our listening audience and the folks here, if you want to be a part of our database, please, Francine has forms that will be filled in, will be vetted, and will be completed, and included in our database. So it is an open database from the standpoint that we want to keep it updated, we want to keep it fresh. So as things come up, as situations arise, or as things change, we want to keep the database as accurate as possible. So please include that in your thinking. But the biggest thing is that, as Nancy said, there's a lot of information here that in our community, and we have a place now that is accessible, that people can access either from a resource need or to become a volunteer. So please, if you run across people who say, I don't know what to do, just remind them of the Resource Center, and our folks will be able to help direct them to something that will be beneficial to our community. Okay, any other commissioners? Rita?
Yes, sir, thank you. I'd like to be very brief because we have some wonderful doctors that are going to speak to us, and that's much more important than my little notice. We really are having a wonderful occasion, which is annual, and in our jurisdiction here on the council, we have a Senior of the Year award. It should be given to a volunteer who does very many things at his own expense, and sometimes at her own expense, so that we have some benefits that are very, very valuable to our seniors. All I'm asking for today is nominations for anyone you know that has done anything for the seniors in this area. It can be Thousand Oaks, Newbury Park, and we just want a letter telling us what this person does. If you will mail a short note nominating a person that you know is deserving, mail it to Francine at the Brimhall Library, 1401 Jans Road, and we'll be glad to take it under consideration. Choose one person, and come June, the second Thursday in June is June 13th, and we will have a wonderful dinner with a person chosen from all the nominations that you make. We'd be very grateful for this, and the person is a very deserving person. We've had many contests in the past that they're wonderful people. They do a lot. They don't get any recognition, and this is our opportunity to recognize one particular person. We'd be glad to have nominations from anyone, and if you just simply get permission from that person, then they could be nominated, and we'll take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. This really is one of our major events of the year, our support of the Senior of the Year, and we're very happy to, as Rita was saying, to acknowledge what some of these seniors have done in the community. We have 5 or 6 people up there, and we're just so happy, and it's just so enlightening to hear what some of these folks have done for our community. So just to add to it, Rita, let's make this a good one, so we're looking forward to applications. Anybody else? All right, I just got a couple of things here. I know Brenda didn't bring this up, but because they're having an early reduction in fee, this Senior Concerns is running the 15K Love Run coming up, and they'd like to have folks enter as soon as possible. So if you can enter by March 15th, it's at a reduced price. So, yes, Team Young and the rest of us. Yeah, if you thought I felt like a puppet, it was. Francine was telling. Okay. But yeah, think of that team to join. Miss Senior California, I know Susan Cashman isn't here, but I did want to put a plug in for folks to think about that. It's another honor to show the senior ladies of our community, the elegance that they still have and hold for us in our community. So that is something to think about. We'd like to remind folks about the TO Thousand Oaks City Calendar. We're trying to enlist more activities that folks would be interested in. They'll be displayed on the Thousand Oaks City Calendar. The dates of the SAMP meetings, our dates for telecasts and things like that, as well as other community events. We'd like to encourage folks to use the city calendar to find out things that are going on in our community. And Nick, I got to congratulate you. I saw you using your iPad for your speech there. You're trying to drag us into the 21st century, huh?
Well, I don't know about dragging the rest of you, but I'm trying to go there myself.
Okay. Well, good for you. Good for you. All right. Unless there's anything else. All right. She has a comment of sorts.
I just wanted to comment on your Miss Senior America. That will be May 19th at the Global Adult Center. Susan's dealing with some other issues and couldn't be here today. There's already 4 registrants, 2 other possibilities, and some more coming in. And it is for women that are 60 plus, and it is a really fun program. So they get to do their evening where they get to do a talent. They get to do their little speech. They're asked a question about their philosophy of life, and they do an interview that's even before the whole thing, and it's judged. And it is absolutely wonderful to see everybody out there. So tickets will be available, I think, the first part of April, if not sooner. We also have all the information. If anybody's out there and interested, we do have the forms at the Global Adult Center. You can always call, and we can make sure to get you linked up with that. Yes. No, 19th. No, 19th. Sunday the 19th. May 19th, yes.
I won't be there. Yeah.
So it's a really great event. I just wanted to add a little more to it since Susan wasn't here. Thank you.
Thank you for embellishing, my dear. Thank you again. All right, so I think that's about completing item 7. Just 2 thoughts I'd like to leave you with. Volunteering does a mind and body good, and buy local, it helps our community prosperity. All right, prosperity? Is there a dentist here?
No.
All right, that ends that, and I'd like to turn the meeting over to Jim. Item 8.
Thank you, David. Well, welcome, UCLA. I'm wondering who's minding the store. We have 6 doctors with us here today. We're very excited about this program. I've been pushing for this subject matter for some time, and I'm delighted you're all here. I would like to introduce our moderator for today's program. Now, Dr. Matt is the medical director for the Department of Medicine and Community Services. He's an associate professor of internal medicine. In his spare time, he's a diplomat for the American Boards of Internal Medicine and Infectious Diseases. And Dr. Matt has been a practicing internal medical physician now for like 30 years. And just so he'll have something else to do, he is now leading the expansion for the UCLA health community and is helping us run this program and get Thousand Oaks into the UCLA system. Welcome, Dr. Matteo Donalfo. Dr. Matt.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Robbie and I appreciate you asking us back and allowing us to start this lecture series, which I hope will be the start of a long and very interesting relationship with the Council on Aging. Today we're going to have a series of lectures geared to seniors. 5 of our physicians who are now practicing in Westlake and Thousand Oaks will be giving those lectures, and I just wanted to on behalf of the department, thank you all for inviting us here. The first lecturer will be Dr. Ravi Dave. Dr. Dave is a cardiologist who's spearheading our cardiovascular programs in the Northwest campus. Dr. Dave is going to be speaking on heart health, take action and have a healthy heart. After Ravi's presentation, these presentations will be about 10 minutes, will be Dr. Raz Izraji. Dr. Izraji comes from our Department of Medicine Internal Medicine Training Program, specializes in internal medicine, is working out of the Westlake office. Ravi works out of both the Westlake and Thousand Oaks office. Raz is going to be talking on supplements, risks and benefits, and then Dr. Rachel Ferrara, who's a graduate of our family practice program at UCLA, will be talking about adult vaccines, myths and realities. And then she will be followed by Dr. Kavita Nar, who will be talking about preventative health screenings, a must for seniors. Dr. Nar comes from the Mayo Clinic and family medicine trained. And last but not least is Dr. Shalise Newmark, who will be talking about osteoporosis, prevention, and new treatments. Dr. Newmark comes from our UCLA Olive View Internal Medicine programs, practicing out of the Thousand Oaks office as well. Thank you very much, and I will get out of their way.
Good afternoon, everyone. My job today is to give you some information about how to have a healthy heart. I'm going to talk about a few things that can help you be more healthy and also help you with awareness. Today, I'm a professor of medicine at UCLA, and my specialty is cardiology. So in the interest of time, I've made a list of top 10 things because I have 10 minutes, and I'll be talking about each item for about a minute or so. All of us love lists. I have a list of everything on my phone, and to honor that, that's what I'll be talking about. So starting from the bottom, number 10, I would like all of you who continue to smoke or who are exposed to secondhand smoke to stop smoking. You see 3 bars in front of you. As you smoke more, your risk of mortality or risk of heart disease goes higher. I try to think of these 3 bars as 3 steps leading to the ICU. The more you smoke, the closer you get to the ICU. If you stop smoking, you climb out of the ICU and out of the hospital, which I'm sure nobody likes to visit. So the largest bar on the right is if you smoke more than 15 cigarettes a day. So the first tip I can give you is to stop smoking. Going to the next tip, lose weight. You have three maps of United States of America, and I know the colors are blue and red, and most people think it's a political map, but it's a map looking at as to how heavy America is getting. The blues, the light blues, the lighter the blue, the lighter your body weight is, and the more dense purple, red colors are which on this graph at least mentions that the weight's going up. The top map, which is almost blue with some blacks in the middle, is from about 30 years ago. The map on the top right, the one with a little bit of yellow, is from about 20 years ago. And the map, which is in the middle, the largest map, is from a couple of years ago. And you can see that as time has gone, the population of the United States has gotten heavier, and this poses a huge health risk, an epidemic of conditions like heart disease, diabetes. So I would like all of you to encourage all of you to lose weight. My number 8 tip for you today is to increase physical activity. You see multiple bars over there, and as you exercise more, as you move further to the right, your risk of heart disease goes down. Now the red bars are if you were to do walking, which is a very good activity that all of us can easily do without joining a gym. The bar on the right is if you're interested in more other kinds of activities, such as joining a gym, going on a treadmill, using a stationary bicycle. So as you do increase physical activity, your risk of heart disease goes down. Now, most people that I talk to will tell me that they don't have time to do physical activity. I find that a little bit hard to believe, but yes, we do our busy schedules. One of the things that I tell my patients is that if you are a fan of a particular type of a sports team, if you like the Clippers or the Lakers, every time they are playing, your job is to not only watch them, but also get on a treadmill or get on a bicycle and watch maybe a quarter or so while they're playing. If you do that, you will have a good regimen, a good prescription in terms of losing weight. And then when their season is over, you pick up another sports team and so on and so forth. The one thing you don't want to start watching is a 5-day cricket match, because that could end up giving you a heart attack because it's too long. My number 7 tip for you is to control high blood pressure. As blood pressure starts going up, so does your risk of heart disease. The tallest bar that you see all the way on the right is if your blood pressure is 180 over 100. And that's the time when you should be headed to the emergency room, because you could be risking bad things such as stroke and a heart attack from happening. The lowest number, which is all the way on the left, which we consider normal, is with less than 120 over 80, which is the recommended blood pressure. My number 6 tip for you today is to control diabetes. Diabetes is an interesting condition because when you have diabetes, you have a lot of things that come with it. Not only does your blood sugar go high and your risk of heart disease goes up, but you also end up having high blood pressure after a few years. Your cholesterol levels tend to be higher. Because of all the medical conditions and sometimes due to some medications, people who have diabetes also are more prone to gaining weight. So you end up collecting pretty much all the risk factors for heart disease. So on this particular slide, the red line that you see at the bottom is for somebody who doesn't have diabetes. But if you do have diabetes, and if you have diabetes for 20 years, which is the end all the way on the right of the slide, your risk for heart disease is over 50%. So it is very important that if you do develop diabetes, to control it, to get your blood sugar levels under control, and to take appropriate lifestyle modifications and medications. My number 5 tip for you is to lower your cholesterol. Now, this is a little confusing slide to look at, and I apologize for that. But think of these bars that you see as buildings. Obviously, the building which is the lowest, the one-story building, is the building which has the lowest risk. The healthiest people live there. And that is if your cholesterol, your bad cholesterol is less than 100 and your good cholesterol is quite high. Now, the people who live in the skyscraper all the way in the back, the tallest red building, they are not so lucky because they have a low, a bad cholesterol level which is over 200 and a high cholesterol that's less than 30. Those are the people who are at the highest risk. And your risk increases as your bad cholesterol goes up and your good cholesterol goes down. So ideally, your bad cholesterol, your LDL levels should be less than 100, and your good cholesterol should be at least over 45. My next tip for you is to lower stress. It is quite difficult to do that in the current day and age. There are plenty of things that expose us to stress, but why is lowering stress important? A stressful life can help people adopt poor habits. Most people who smoke continue to smoke and have a hard time giving up smoking. If you are under stress, you tend to eat badly. You want to, you make yourself, because things around you are not going well, you feel like you need to give yourself some, from time to time, some credit by either eating that gallon of ice cream or that big pizza, and people end up having poor habits. Now, a lot of us, when we are stressed out, we don't feel well as well. And is that just because of the stress, or is that because your body is not behaving properly? And that's because it has a lot of negative effects on your heart health, and your body functions poorly. If you have any kind of acute stress, your blood flow to the heart is reduced. Your heart tends to beat irregularly. You have an increased incidence of clotting of the blood. All things that can promote heart disease, stroke, heart arrhythmias. And when you experience stress for a prolonged period of time, it can make you susceptible to having heart disease, which obviously is the leading cause of death, as I'm going to get to in my later slides. So lowering stress is very important. If you can remove the stressing agent away from you, that's the easiest way to lower it, but sometimes that's not easy to do. So in that case, exercise, eating right, doing things such as meditation, yoga, talking to your friends, having many friends, keeping yourself involved in a lot of activity, those are things that will help you lower stress. My number 3 tip for you today is to increase awareness of heart disease in women. The top slide is the actual cause of death in women. The one on red, the one in the bar in red, which is the highest bar, all the way on left, is death from all sorts of heart disease and cardiovascular disease. The one next to it, the one in gray, which I don't know if you can see that well on the screen, is from all cancers combined. The one in pink, which is all the way on the right, is from breast cancer. Now, the list of bars at the bottom is the actual responses from women in terms of what they perceive as their biggest risk for death. And you can see that even though breast cancer, it does cause about 50 deaths out of 100,000 population, most women think that it causes there is a much higher risk from breast cancer. So I think it's very important for us to increase awareness that heart disease is still the number 1 killer for women and is something that needs to be aware of and needs to be focused on. My number 2 tip for today is to eat healthy. Now, this slide again may not project well on your screens, but if you look at the left half, the green and the red half of the circle, those constitute vegetables and fruits. And the top right half, which is brownish, is instituting whole grains in your diet. So when you look at your plate, 3/4 of it needs to look vegetarian, which is anytime you put food on your plate, it has to, 3/4 of it has to be fruits, vegetables, and grains. It can't be a big steak right in the middle. It can be, chicken or other kinds of meats in the middle. It has 3/4 has to be vegetarian. You're only allowed a 1/4 portion to be a protein portion, which ideally, if you choose fish or poultry, beans and nuts, that would be good sources of protein. Red meat you can eat, but you should eat sparingly. And my last tip for the day is to look at what's happening right now. What are some conditions that causes death in men and women? The dark blue are the men and the light blue are the women, and you can see that the leading cause of death in both men and women is heart disease. The next one is all cancers combined. So we need to be aware of the risk of what heart disease has and do something about it. Talk to your doctors. A simple question that you can ask your doctor when you visit your doctor again would be, what is my risk for heart disease and how can I lower it? And that will start a whole series of conversations that will help lower and help you achieve your goal. Thank you for having me today.
Hello, my name is Raza Shragi. I'm an internal medicine physician at the UCLA Westlake Village office. I want to thank you again for the opportunity of having us here today. One of the things I enjoy the most about being a physician is educating and empowering my patients, and that's where this talk that I'm giving you today is coming from. The topic is vitamins, herbals, and supplements. So I'm going to talk a little bit about safety and regulations. I'm going to give you some examples of some commonly used agents, what data we have on their effectiveness and adverse effects you should look out for, and then finally provide you with some resources that you can access at home. So why is this an important topic? Well, actually, a survey in 2007 found that almost 18% of U.S. adults were using some kind of herbal medication. And in fact, in the population 57 to 84, almost 70% were taking some kind of over-the-counter herbal or supplement. And this is a $5 billion industry. Why is this important to me as a physician? Well, in this study, they found that many of the patients weren't reporting to their doctor that they were taking any sort of supplement. Why didn't they report it? Either their doctor didn't ask or the patient didn't think it was important to tell them. So I have some true or false questions just to go through some of the misconceptions about herbals. So true or false, supplement labels are allowed to make health claims such as promotes cardiovascular health or protects the immune system. True. True. Herbal supplements have standardized dosages levels for adults. False. Very good. You guys are well educated. Herbal supplement manufacturer claims and statements about their products are backed up by hard scientific evidence or regulated by a government agency. Everyone says false. You're right. Herbal supplement manufacturers are required to regulate the quality of their product to ensure there is no contamination. False. Right again. Herbal supplements are required to have warning labels for interactions with other medications or allergic reactions. False. So a little background. The FDA in the 1990s tried to bring down some more regulation on herbals and supplements. The industry, the manufacturing, supplement manufacturers actually got behind this and they were able to block it. So actually now it's shifted the responsibility to the FDA to prove that something is actually dangerous or unsafe. Also, the manufacturers don't have to report if there's any post-marketing adverse effects the way we see with our regular prescription medications. So this says, I like green tea, it's the color of money. So obviously, as consumers, you should be aware this is an industry. Some safety concerns to keep in mind. So variability in the composition. So for example, Echinacea, we know that the root can have some effects on boosting the immune system. But if the manufacturer is using the stem or the leaves, it could have absolutely no effect for you. Also need to be aware of hazardous materials like arsenic, lead, mercury that could be contaminating it, or even microbes. And finally, variability. There's no standardized way of how things are prepared, so you need to be aware of that. Why is this important? So I don't know if any of you are familiar with thalidomide. It was an over-the-counter drug that was used in the 1950s, particularly for morning sickness in pregnant women. And unfortunately, we later found out that it caused severe birth defects. So over-the-counter medications can have effects and actually can have very powerful or detrimental effects. We need to be aware of that. Ephedrine is another example. We use that in fen-phen, and for weight loss, we later found out that it can cause arrhythmias, strokes, long-term heart complications. Another thing to keep in mind is that herbals can often interact with the prescription medications you're taking. And finally, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of well-funded or well-designed trials to look at the efficacy and risks available with herbals. So I don't want you to feel that I'm totally discrediting herbals. A lot of medications that we're currently using are derived from herbal medications. So on the top left, you see the foxglove plant. I've actually seen that here in the Canejo Valley. From that, we derive digoxin, which is an antiarrhythmic medication. We use it for heart failure. In the middle, you see the California poppy. From that, we derive our very strong pain medications like morphine. On the top right, you see belladonna. From that, we derive atropine, and that's what we use in CPR emergency situations to restart the heart. And the bottom row, one is a tree, and we have a flower and a bacteria. And from those, we derive chemotherapy, actually life-saving chemotherapy agents that we've used for breast cancer. So this is just a brief list of some commonly used herbals and supplements. I am just talking about a couple of them today. I don't have enough time to go through all of them. And herbals have been used or proposed to be used for many, many different ailments. This is just a brief list. So we have aging, ulcers, memory problems, all sorts of things. So I'm going to talk briefly today on vitamin C. There is some data for echinacea and zinc that for echinacea can decrease the duration and the severity of a cold, and for zinc, specifically in the lozenge format, can decrease the prevention of a cold. I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about vitamin C. So vitamin C has been used to prevent and treat colds. It's been used for macular degeneration, cataracts, cancer. It's an antioxidant. It binds free radicals. In terms of data, looking at a study, or actually a review of multiple studies that involved 11,000 patients, we found that it can reduce the duration and the severity of a cold. Unfortunately, it didn't really help to prevent a cold. And unfortunately, when they tried to reproduce these results, they weren't able to. Things to keep in mind, vitamin C can interfere with specifically HIV medications. It can increase your blood sugar. It can cause some stomach upset. Things to keep in mind. So it's a relatively, it doesn't have a lot of side effects, and if it has some effect for you, then it's something safe you could consider. This reads, I'm not feeling well. Do you know where I can nibble on some echinacea? Okay, next I'm going to talk about black cohosh. So this is, again, another plant native to North America, and we know that the root has some estrogen-like activity, and for that reason it's been used for the postmenopausal or perimenopausal symptoms of hot flushes or hot flashes. There is currently a study going on by the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, and they have found some usefulness specifically for hot flashes. And the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology has released a consensus statement that it can be helpful when used in short term, so 6 months. Currently, that study that's going on is looking at long-term use. Some drawbacks, there have been rare cases of liver toxicity, headaches. Of course, if you're pregnant or if you have breast cancer, you should avoid it, or if you have any underlying liver disease because of that estrogen activity. Try organic food, or as your grandparents called it, food. Okay, the last one I'm going to talk about today is cranberry, and that's been proposed to prevent recurrent urinary tract infections and also kidney stones. And sources for that would be cranberry juice cocktail or a concentrated cranberry or the actual fruit. The proposed hypothesis for how it works is that the cranberry has a protein that prevents bacteria, specifically E. coli, from prevents it from binding the urinary tract. Also, theoretically, can acidify the urine and therefore prevent kidney stones. A review of 10 studies that incorporated 1,000 patients in total compared cranberry juice to placebo and found that it actually was useful in preventing urinary tract infections. Things to keep in mind: it can cause some bleeding, it can elevate the blood sugar, and it can actually increase the risk for certain types of kidney stones. But overall, cranberry juice can be used in older adults and pregnant women to help prevent urinary tract infections. Not treat them, but prevent them. So in summary, these are top 5 learning points for Herbals, some take-home points. If you're taking the medication warfarin, which is a blood-thinning medication, it has the potential to interact with many other medications, including prescriptions, herbals, and supplements. So probably best to avoid those things. Next, more is not always better. Many adverse effects of vitamins, herbals, and supplements is secondary to megadoses or large doses of supplements. Third, food trumps pills. It's better to get your nutrients from food. And as Dr. Dave was mentioning, a well-balanced diet is a better way to get your nutrients than from a pill. Avoid herbals if you're pregnant or nursing, if you're taking multiple medications, if you have any kidney or liver problems, and especially if you're going for an operation or a procedure, because many of the supplements can interact with the anesthetic, or they can increase your risk for bleeding or a bleeding complication. Finally, your multivitamins should be geared towards your individual needs. So in pregnancy, something with folic acid. For postmenopausal women, calcium and vitamin D. And age over 50, a good regular multivitamin is what you should look for. So resources for home, the NIH, which is a government-funded agency, has a shoot-off called the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine. If you just Google NIH and herbal, you'll come on this website. You can click on drugs and supplements, and it has an extensive list of every herb, supplement, vitamin you can come up with. It has data, it has usefulness, it has adverse effects, and things that you should look out for while you're on those medications. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Rachel Ferrara. I'm a family physician and I work out of the UCLA Thousand Oaks office. And I'm here today to talk about adult vaccines, myths, and realities. So according to the World Health Organization, the 2 public health interventions that have had the greatest impact on the world's health are clean water and vaccines. But although we've shown a huge decrease in burden of many infectious diseases because of the vaccines we've developed, there's still a lot of misinformation out there about vaccines, and I think some of that prevents them from being used to their greatest potential. So that's what I'm here today to talk about. So there are over 25 vaccines licensed in the United States. What we're going to focus on today is just 4 of those. So what I have listed up there, the tetanus series, Tdap and TD, influenza vaccine, herpes zoster or shingles vaccine, and the pneumococcal vaccine, which is also known as Pneumovax. So these are the 4 most commonly recommended vaccines for healthy adults. And keep in mind, these are definitely the bare minimum vaccines. So many patients definitely might require additional doses of these particular vaccines or additional vaccine series, particularly patients who suffer from chronic diseases such as diabetes, kidney, liver disease, patients who did not receive their primary childhood vaccinations, and patients who have particular exposures due to either work or travel definitely might need other vaccinations that I'm not going to talk about today. So definitely a good conversation to have with your doctor. And in keeping with the theme of talking about myths and realities about vaccines, before I talk about each of these individual vaccines, I did want to mention side effects. So side effects are a reality of vaccines, and like any medical intervention, any vaccine we give does have some potential risk of side effects. Fortunately, serious or life-threatening side effects are incredibly rare with the routine vaccines we give today, somewhere on the order of 1 out of 100,000 to 1 out of 1 million. And the more common side effects tend to be short-lived or mild. So clearly, even though there is risk of side effects with any vaccine, the benefits of vaccination far outweigh those risks. So the first set of vaccines we're going to talk about are the tetanus vaccines. So there are two kinds. There's Tdap, which contains tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. And pertussis is whooping cough. And then there's TD, which just has tetanus and diphtheria. So around 2005, we realized that adults don't necessarily retain their immunity to pertussis from the vaccines they received as children. And we started to recommend that all adults receive 1 Pertussis booster during their adulthood. So the current recommendation is that any adult who has not yet received a Tdap during adulthood receive a one-time Tdap vaccine, regardless of how long it's been since your last tetanus vaccine. So even if it was 2 years ago, if you have not had a Tdap with pertussis in it, go ahead and get one. And then continue with a TD or tetanus diphtheria vaccine every 10 years thereafter as a booster. And so just to talk a little bit about the diseases that these vaccines prevent. So tetanus is a bacterial infection. It can impact the nervous system and cause lockjaw and severe spasms of the respiratory muscles. Diphtheria is thankfully at this point a very rare respiratory infection, which is concerning because the bacteria can actually develop a membrane in the airway that can prevent breathing. And pertussis is whooping cough. So it's a cold-like bacterial infection which is characterized by severe and violent coughing spasms. And that one we're especially concerned about because we have had some infant deaths in the past few years with pertussis, and that's one of the reasons we're really trying to vaccinate all adults as well, because infants can't be vaccinated. So the influenza vaccine, or the flu shot, contains 3 strains of virus. And it's basically the 3 strains that are predicted for that year to be the most likely strains to cause outbreaks. And because the strains are different every year and they're based on surveillance data and tend to be pretty accurate, but because the strains are different every year, we do recommend vaccination annually. The flu shot does take about 2 weeks to reach its full effect. So generally, we like to see everybody vaccinated in the fall, right when the shots come out, and not wait until you start seeing on the news that the flu epidemics are everywhere, because often there's not enough time to reach full immunity if you get vaccinated after the epidemic has started. There is a high-dose vaccine for adults 65 and older, and because it's a higher dose, it boosts the immunity, and adults 65 and older are actually at the highest risk for complications or death from flu. And for those of you who have heard about or might be curious about the nasal spray vaccine, it does exist, but it is not recommended for patients older than 49. So 50 and up should have injection vaccines. So the vaccines are about 90% effective, and they are effective at preventing influenza. And what influenza is a potentially severe respiratory infection that's accompanied by body aches and generally pretty high fevers. And the reason we worry so much about influenza is that it's often accompanied by a pneumonia, and the pneumonia is what can be fatal. And in fact, we do see still 3,000 to 49,000 deaths in this country every year from influenza, depending upon the strain that year. And of those deaths, 90% are in patients over 65. So that population in particular needs to be vaccinated every year. Herpes zoster vaccine, which is shingles. We currently recommend that patients over 60 receive a one-time dose of the vaccine. And something important to note that patients ask about a lot, even in patients who have had shingles before, we do recommend vaccinating. There is a benefit to having a vaccination, even if you've had shingles infection in the past. So shingles is caused by the chickenpox virus. It can remain dormant in the body for up to several decades, and then it reactivates. And when it reactivates, it causes a pretty painful, itchy, burning, blistering rash, usually in a band-like distribution in one part of the body. That usually clears up, and although it's uncomfortable, actually one of the bigger concerns is something that's called post-herpetic neuralgia, which is kind of thought of as the dreaded complication of having shingles. And what that is even after the rash clears up for weeks, months, or sometimes even years, patients will have severe pain in the area where the rash had been. So the vaccine that we have now will prevent about 51% of cases of shingles, which is not great, but it reduces it by half, but it will prevent 67% of cases of post-herpetic neuralgia, or that severe and sometimes debilitating pain. So again, that's a one-time vaccine over the age of 60. And then the pneumococcal vaccine is the last one I'm going to talk about today. That is also recommended for generally healthy patients without chronic medical conditions to be given as a one-time dose in patients when they're 65 or older. So this vaccine protects against a single kind of bacteria, and that bacteria is called Streptococcus pneumoniae. That bacteria causes not only pneumonia, but it can also cause blood infections and meningitis, and the vaccine protects against all of those. Something important to note about this vaccine is that even though it's called a pneumonia vaccine, it doesn't necessarily protect against every kind of pneumonia, only those that are caused by this streptococcal species. But again, it does also protect against the blood infections and meningitis that the bacteria can cause. So as I mentioned earlier, there is quite a bit of misinformation, and there are a lot of myths that circulate about vaccines. And I just wanted to talk about the top 3 that I hear about on a pretty regular basis in practice, and patients come in and ask me these questions. So number one myth is that flu shots can cause the flu. Number 2 is that some vaccines contain dangerous levels of mercury, and patients are concerned about that. And then the third one is patients will come in and say, well, I've had pneumonia in the past, so I don't think I need a pneumonia vaccine. So here are the realities. This can be the number one take-home point for today, and I'll be happy. The flu vaccine cannot cause the flu. It is absolutely impossible. It can definitely cause 1 to 2 days worth of mild flu-like symptoms, but it's a completely inactivated vaccine, and it cannot cause the flu. And then in response to the concern about mercury, there are a few vaccines that contain thimerosal, which is a mercury compound. However, they're not thought to pose a big health risk for 2 reasons. The first is that thimerosal is actually a different form of mercury than the one that's found in fish and that's known to be an environmental toxin. And the reason is thimerosal is much more easily broken down and excreted by the human body. So it's thought to be much less toxic. And then the second reason is if you look at this chart, most vaccines, and actually of the 5 that I'm talking about today, you'll see that all of them have at least one formulation with no mercury and no thimerosal. And of the ones that do, it's a pretty scant amount. So either less than 0.00012% or 0.01%. So, first of all, you can always get the vaccine without mercury in it if that's a concern. And second of all, it's much, much less concerning than mercury that's a big toxin. And then the last question I get is, either I've had the flu in the past or I've had pneumonia in the past. Do I need to be vaccinated? And the answer is yes, for 2 reasons. One, you may have had an infection with a different organism, and The second reason is that having had an infection in the past doesn't always confer the same level of immunity that a vaccination will. So we still recommend that regardless of your infection history or what you may have had in the past, that most vaccines should be given according to schedule. So this is where information and pictures came from. And thanks a lot for having us today.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kavita Nair, and I'm one of the physicians at the UCLA Thousand Oaks Clinic. And I'm here today to talk to you about preventive care and why it is important for seniors. It's a must. And excuse my voice, I've got a very hoarse voice, so hopefully you can still hear me. Okay. How about this? Better? So this is what prevention is not. You don't want your disease to get this bad before you think about going to the doctor. And as you all know, disease is usually not this obvious. So why do we need to prevent? Obviously it's a smart investment in your future because it lowers your health risks. It has, first of all, let me tell this, it has benefits not just as an individual, but to the society as such. And they are lowering your health risks, delaying or preventing the onset of disease, and lowering the cost of treating chronic disease. And as you all know, it matters, costs matter, not just to the individual, but to the health system and the society as a whole. Let's see where California stands in comparison to the rest of the nation. This graph shows you, the lighter colors show you the amount of, the print is not big enough that you can read it, but the top slide shows you women ages 50 to 64 who are up to date with their preventive services. The lighter the color, the less up to date, the darker the color, the more up to date. We have a lot of work to do to catch up to some of the, best utilized preventive services being best utilized in some of the states, like the Midwestern states, Minnesota, South Dakota, some of the eastern states and New England states. This is women and this is men. These are just sample slides. Let's focus on why we fuss about the senior population with respect to prevention. Each of these pie charts shows you the whole population, 50 to 64-year-old on the left, and the whole population 65 and up. So focus on the red section. It shows you the section of the 50 to 64-year-olds who are not up to date and not current with their recommended services. And same story with the 65 and up. Well over half are not current with their recommended services. So this is despite the fact that Medicare covers all these preventive services and screenings, and also the fact that these patients in these age groups do visit their doctors for other reasons. So it's a matter of, getting to know what the recommendations are, what you need to get, and we'll come to that in the next slide. I'll just summarize briefly the gist of this slide. If you look at the right upper corner, it shows you that the population, ages 50 and up, is rising and is continuing to rise and will do so for the next several decades. The left slide shows you, the bar graphs show you age 50 to 64. The current US population, the whole bar shows you the total population, and the blue is 50 to 64. In 2030, it's expected to almost double, where 1 in 4 people in the United States will be 50 to 64. And same story again with 65 and up. It's 1 in 5 that's going to be the population 65 and up by the year 2030. So what is preventing people from getting all these services? It's a bunch of stuff. Lack of awareness is very common. So what are we doing as the medical system to correct this is to educate people about recommendations, what Medicare covers, physical barriers like difficulties accessing transportation, being disabled, so transportation assistance, disabled services, social and cultural. There are societies and cultures that might be skeptical to medical testing and the medical system. So allaying those fears and addressing those fears, providing translators as needed. Community, there's lack of cohesiveness in delivery of these services in the community. And there are initiatives like the SPARK initiative and the CDC AARP, initiatives that, and Healthy Adults 2020. These are just some of the initiatives that are in place to improve care delivery. And legislation, Medicare Act of 65 and the Affordable Care Act of 2010, the Obamacare, essentially eliminates your out-of-pocket costs for all these services that I'm going to talk about. Preventive services falls under three broad categories: immunizations, screening tests, and measures to prevent the progress of disease. So what is in it for me? What can you do? If there's one thing I can highlight in this slide, I would say get your annual Medicare wellness visit. There are all other things you can do. Of course, there's a caregiver support, which some of you who might fall in the sandwich generation, so to speak, sandwich between taking care of your kids and taking care of the elderly parents. There's a lot of support groups that help the caregivers. And then staying active, staying involved. And this is, again, a list of things that is covered by Medicare. First preventive visit, your annual wellness visit, and all the other services that I'm going to be talking about. This slide really gives you the gist of basic prevention. Obviously, the first one shows you no smoking, no alcohol, preventing alcohol misuse and smoking. Improves not just cognition and memory and prevents falls, but also smoking cessation also helps decrease your heart disease and stroke risk significantly. Aspirin has a great protective effect against heart disease and stroke. Mediterranean diet, which we were talking about during lunch, rich in olive oil and multicolored produce. Exercise is medicine, and I can't stress that enough. Any amount of exercise, even 20 minutes. American Association of Sports Medicine recommends about 30 minutes of aerobic exercise every other day, ideally 5 days a week, with some muscle training and balance training exercises. That balance training actually helps prevent falls, improving your balance. This just gives you a synopsis of what I just went through. And vaccines, my colleague Dr. Ferrara gave a very comprehensive talk about this, so I'm skipping through the slide. Essentially, it's an ounce of prevention is a ton of cure. Cancer screening, this is the big thing where really I have to emphasize to everybody how it's really a matter of weighing benefits against risks at all levels, not just the FDA and the USPSTF, which is United States Preventive Task Force. They evaluate the benefits and risks to the population as a whole. Your provider or doctor evaluates the benefits and risks for the patient, you, and you as a patient should evaluate all these screening tests and recommendations based on your personal values and preferences. So briefly, colon, breast, and cervical cancer screening reduce cancer-specific deaths the most. And prostate cancer screen has been removed from the USPSTF screens recommendations, except for high-risk individuals. And I'm happy to talk about it during the Q&A about the reason for it. And colon cancer screening. Colonoscopy is the choice test, and the recommendation is to screen every 50 to 75-year-old patient at average risk every 10 years, and no more screens after 85. And there are other tests for really frail elderly, but colonoscopy is considered the choice because it looks at the whole colon or the whole large intestine. Mammogram is used for breast cancer screening. It causes a 30% decrease in deaths from breast cancer, studies have shown. Mammography annually, or 1 to 2 years for women with life expectancy over 4 years, starting at age 40, actually. But in this screen, I mentioned 50 because that's the population we are talking about. Pap smears every 3 years. We stop screens at age 65 if they've had adequate screens prior to that. And I can tell you what adequate screens are if anybody is interested at the end of during the Q&A. Hysterectomy for non-cancerous reasons, no more screening. Blood pressure, as you heard from Dr. Dave's talk, is an independent risk factor for heart disease and stroke. Lowering that is key. Although it says goal is less than 140/90, which means that we start treatment at that level, really we like to have blood pressures at 120/80. And, in diabetics, we start treatment 130/80. And there's a 50% decrease in disease and deaths from heart disease, stroke, kidney disease. So benefits really outweigh the risks. Cholesterol, high cholesterol and diabetes, again, independent risk factors for heart disease and stroke. Screen every 5 years for cholesterol and every 3 years for blood sugars. Especially if you're over the age of 45 for men and 55 for women, if you have a blood pressure 135/80 or higher, you're at a higher risk for cardiovascular disease. So, osteoporosis screening, my colleague, Dr. Shalise Newmark, has an excellent talk about this, so I'll leave it to her to talk more about this. But essentially, women are at higher risk. Certain races, Asian race, petite, being on chronic steroids, lack of exercise. So screen women 65 and older with bone densitometry is a recommendation. AAA screen, this is briefly an acronym for abdominal aortic aneurysm. It's the largest vessel in your body that can get expanded and thinned out in your stomach area. And that is especially a risk for men 65 and older who have ever smoked. And some people have a family history of it, so we recommend screening in those populations. It's with a one-time abdominal ultrasound. So these are called the soft screens, just because these don't show up so often in the media. But these are just as important because these screens, functional screening, cognitive, depression screening, vision and hearing, nutrition, preventing falls, incontinence evaluation, medication use and safety, elder abuse screen, driving assessment, financial and social, all these are important because these really can affect the quality of life and functional status and your independence of living. So essentially, my take-home point is use prevention, see prevention as an opportunity, and invest in your future. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hi, my name is Shalise Newmark. I'm with the UCLA group at Thousand Oaks. I'm a general internist there. I'll be talking to you today about osteoporosis, its prevention, and some of the treatments that are coming out. So why should I care? Well, I should care because I'm your doctor, right? But you should care because osteoporosis is obviously a condition that predisposes people to bone fractures, specifically fractures that are sustained in the hip and the vertebra. It's been studied, and hip fractures are linked to increased risk of mortality, hospitalizations, and declines in functional status. In fact, there has been at least one study that said that up to a half of patients who sustain a hip fracture after the age of after the age of 65, lose their ability to live independently thereafter. And this obviously comes at a very high emotional, physical, and financial cost to you, the patient, but also to your loved ones and the healthcare system. And the most important part of this is that this outcome doesn't have to be the case. Osteoporosis is seen as a preventable and treatable disease. Let's talk a little bit about healthy bones. Making healthy bones is an incredibly complicated process. I've listed a few ingredients that are required for healthy bones. I highlight these, which are calcium, vitamin D, phosphorus, estrogen, and weight-bearing exercise, specifically because they're not only some of the most obvious targets for intervening in the realm of prevention of osteoporosis, but also because they are also targets for therapy. I want everyone to look like that statue by the end of the talk. Risk factors for osteoporosis. What I've done is I've highlighted or I've indicated here a few that are potentially modifiable. The list includes any kind of hormonally or estrogen deficient state, for example, menopause. It doesn't matter when or how menopause happened. For some women, they had surgical menopause. Others, it was the natural progression of life. It doesn't matter. If you are menopausal, you're considered hormonally deficient. Also, people or personal or family history who have a history of fracture, specifically a fragility fracture, which would be something like a hip fracture or a vertebral compression fracture, or a fracture anywhere if it was sustained under minimal amount of trauma.
A lifelong diet low in calcium. I underline lifelong because it's important to know that your teenagers and your young adults at home need to be reminded that their dietary habits currently impact their risk of osteoporosis later in life. Any history of recent falls, a lack of exercise, and low body weight. Dr. Nair mentioned Asian populations or more petite individuals sometimes struggle with this particular risk factor. It should be mentioned that a lack of exercise and low body weight go together. Sometimes the opposite go together too, but for the elderly, we lose muscle mass as we age. If we can exercise and build that muscle back up, we can actually put weight on, and we impact our risk of osteoporosis significantly by doing that. Poor health, some people are just, unfortunately, they have a number of maladies that aren't able to be identified as, we are not able to intervene with the risk of osteoporosis. But there are some specific medical illnesses that you can have identified, like hyperthyroidism and diabetes, which specifically impact your risk of osteoporosis. And if we can have those managed appropriately, then your risk of osteoporosis will also go down. Dementia in some cases is associated with instability because of gait abnormalities, but it also is associated with an inability to appropriately track dietary intake, and making sure that a person gets the recommended amount of calcium and vitamin D in the diet can sometimes be impacted by dementia. Alcohol and cigarette use. Obviously, they're the vices that are the lowest hanging fruit, as we say in the medical field, to intervene. These are known to both independently increase the risk of osteoporosis. Certain medications like steroids are also known to worsen your risk of osteoporosis, and vision problems that may predispose you to falls. A word about calcium and vitamin D. As Dr. Ashragi mentioned earlier, it's best to get your calcium and vitamin D and all of your supplements or all of your minerals and vitamins naturally if possible. Some people say, oh, I can't take in enough calcium, I can't eat any dairy. Well, I included a chart of a lot of other foods, mostly fruit and vegetables, which you need anyway in your diet, that do contain a significant amount of calcium. I've included a picture of the sun because the easiest way to get your vitamin D is 15 minutes of unexposed skin in the sun per day. Unfortunately, if you wear sunblock, you won't get that vitamin D activation. So we don't usually recommend that because of the obvious risk of skin cancer if you don't wear sunblock. Other ways you can get vitamin D, which is actually a little more difficult through the diet alone, is that you can look for fortified foods in the grocery store. There are a lot of fruit juices, some milk companies, and there are some whole grains that are also fortified with vitamin D. Unfortunately, this slide is very difficult to see. I'll just review it myself. So as recently as last week, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force came out with a statement that said that supplements of calcium and vitamin D are available in a number of different doses. And they've studied the lower doses. If you are taking lower doses of calcium and vitamin D as supplements, you are not impacting your risk of osteoporosis or fractures thereof at all. In fact, even the higher doses of calcium and vitamin D, it is probably better to take that. You probably have an improved profile of risk against osteoporosis, but there is inadequate studies as of yet to prove it. I would imagine that some of those studies will be coming out within the next few years. So bone density, how do we look at your bones? How do we determine whether or not you have osteoporosis? So bone health exists on a continuum, from healthy bone to thin bone, which in the medical field is called osteopenia, to fragile bone, which is called osteoporosis. We determine where you are on that spectrum using a test called a Dexa scan. It's short for dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, but you don't need to know that. It's just called the Dexa scan. If you were told because you had X-rays at some point that you have osteoporosis, guess what? That's not good enough. We can't make the diagnosis of osteoporosis off of X-rays alone. So they can say that your bone looks abnormally thin. However, we can't say for certain what your osteoporosis, whether or not you qualify as osteoporotic. So that's why we get the Dexa scan. What I want for you to take home from this slide is the box of colors. At the top, you see a green section, in the middle, a yellowish section, and at the bottom, a reddish section. If you are normal, you receive, if your bone, when we do a Dexa scan, basically what is happening is the machine that does the scan compares your bone against a healthy, strong bone, one that would not fracture under minimal stress. And when we give you a score after we put it through it, there's a series of complicated calculations, and basically it generates a score for you. If you are from +2 to -1, your bone is considered normal, of normal density. If your score is from -1 to -2.49, it is considered to be thin, and you qualify as osteopenic. And if your score is less than -2.5, you're considered osteoporotic. So what should you do? So go to your doctor, see what your risks are. Not everyone needs a Dexa scan. There are a number of different guidelines, which is too burdensome and cumbersome to go over in this talk. But generally, if you are a woman over the age of 65, you should have a Dexa scan. If you are menopausal but younger than 65, and you have any of the aforementioned risk factors for osteoporosis, you should probably have a Dexa scan. Or even if you're a man, if you're, for example, a 43-year-old man who for some reason had a compression fracture or a different kind of fracture that's known to be associated with osteoporosis, you probably should also have a Dexa scan. I've included here at the bottom that you do have a choice in your medical care as part of the decision of whether or not to have a Dexa scan. If you're convinced that for whatever reason you may not be interested in taking the medications that are recommended for the treatment of osteoporosis, then there's really no utility in having the scan. So the principles of therapy, this is just a big long list of some of the medications that are on the market and available to you for the treatment, and some of them for the prevention of osteoporosis. The first principle is don't delay treatment. If you know you have osteoporosis or you know you're at risk, modify those modifiable risk factors, begin exercising, do what you can do, talk to your doctor, make sure you are taking calcium and vitamin D, which at this point in time is still recommended at the high dose for people who have diagnosed osteoporosis. The first class of medications is called bisphosphonates. I've underlined the medication called Zolondronate. I've underlined it because it's on a generic. It's the most commonly prescribed medication currently for osteoporosis. What I've done through the list is I've indicated the type of medication it is, so 1 tablet, so those are tablets. If you go to number 4 under bisphosphonates, Zolondronate, that's a 5 milligram IV dose. And then I've indicated in parentheses whether it's a first-line, second-line, or third-line medication for osteoporosis. The first-line medications, most of them are oral. If for some reason someone can't tolerate it or they have other contraindications, then some of the others can be discussed. Denosumab is a monoclonal antibody. It's an injection every 6 months. You can think of it as like a kind of a boost to your immune system, almost like a vaccine that helps to promote healthy bone. The others are much less commonly prescribed, usually because the first 2 classes are utilizable in most patients. The very last one is a selective estrogen receptor modulator. You may recognize this medication, raloxifene. It's in the same class as tamoxifen, which is used to treat hormonally responsive breast cancer. But tamoxifen is not approved for osteoporosis treatment. Raloxifene is. It's 1 tablet daily, if that's the appropriate medication for you. And I mention it only because it brings me to my next point, which is about hormones. So I want to talk just very briefly about this because in the late 80s and 90s, women started opening up and becoming more vocal about what it meant to be menopausal. Probably so. So menopause and all of its wonderful attributes, everything it brings to your life, started being talked about between patients and their physicians kind of in the early 90s to a much more common rate. And as a result of that, women started receiving hormone replacement therapy. It was thought, and it makes sense. If you are losing your hormones and you're having these symptoms from it, then let's replace the hormones and see what happens. As a result of that, the National Institute of Health put together a very large study with over 16,000 women in the late 90s to study not only the effects of hormone replacement therapy on osteoporosis and the fractures, but also cardiovascular disease, including heart attack, stroke, and coronary heart disease, as well as thromboembolic events, which you can think of as life-threatening blood clots, fractures of all kinds, and cancers, breast cancer, endometrial cancer, and colorectal cancer. And what they found is that if you focus here in this box, the hip fracture incidence went down in the hormone recipient group, and so did the incidence of colorectal cancer. So both of these went down. But if you look at all of the other groups, the incidence increased, including breast cancer, coronary heart disease, which, as I mentioned, includes heart attacks and strokes, and DVTs and pulmonary emboli, which, again, you can think of as life-threatening blood clots. So in sum, what came of this study is that, specifically as it pertains to my talk, for the treatment of osteoporosis, while you will see a reduction in fracture if you are on hormone replacement therapy, the risks far outweigh the benefits, and therefore it is not FDA approved. Hormone replacement therapy is not FDA approved for the treatment of osteoporosis. So past and future. Where have we been in the past? So in the past, fluoride and strontium formulations have been shown to increase bone density, but unfortunately they haven't ever been shown to actually decrease fractures. I think that in the future it could be possible that these could be reevaluated and we could see whether or not maybe there is some potential for these to be used as other therapies. And the last two are similar. I'll summarize them both by, it's a lot of complicated scientific verbiage there, but basically, if you think about it as these medications are targeted to go down to where the cells are formed, and it's attempting to skew the formation of cells towards the bone-forming cells, which are called osteoblasts, and away from the bone-resorbing cells called osteoclasts, and in other ways also affect the bone-forming mechanisms that include hormonal cascades and such throughout the body. So in sum, I have a few take-home points: that osteoporosis, first of all, is a preventable disease. It's also a treatable disease. That teenagers, your children and grandchildren, need to be aware of their calcium intake, to talk with your doctor about your risk of osteoporosis and possible treatments that may be available to you, and to continue to watch for new recommendations on calcium and vitamin D intake, as well as new medications that could be coming to the market. I sincerely thank you. This is my information and the information for the Thousand Oaks office. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And again, UCLA doctors, welcome to the Canejo. I think as you can see that we have an energetic and well-informed cadre of folks who are going to be part of our community, and thank you for joining us. Now, we're going to officially end our meeting, but for the folks in the audience, the doctors will take questions. They are in to take questions. So unless there's any other business to be discussed, I officially adjourn the meeting at 2:45. Thank you again.